Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a layout chair for you. I am going to be showing you layouts that I made for my creative scrapbook using the limited edition kit. There are 4 different kits and the limited edition kit is my favorite, and that's the one I use each month to create layouts. So I am going to show you the layouts that I've made over the last few months, and I am going to divide this into 2 separate videos because I have quite a few layouts to show you. Before I get started, I wanted to answer a question that I've gotten several times. I've been asked how I store my layouts because my layouts might be a little more dimensional than some other layouts that people create, or even some other layouts that I create. Sometimes people wonder if I put them in albums, and I do. I put all of my layouts in 3-ring albums, and sometimes because they are a little more dimensional than other layouts, I can fit less in each album. But I do store them in the page protectors, and I think that that's the best and safest place to store my layouts. I've been storing them in a pile so that I could create a layout chair, but what I found is that it's not a good way to store them. It's a way that they can get warped. And then also sometimes I find that some things from the layout underneath will stick to the back of the layout on top. So now I'm going to be storing my layouts in racks that will stand the layouts straight up. And I think that that will preserve them better until I can put them in their albums. So I'm going to get started now with December of 2021. This kit was one of my favorite. I absolutely love this combination of 49 and Market and Blue Fern Studio papers that they had in this kit. This first layout, Opening Christmas Presents, was made using one of the pear tree cut files that is available to my Creative Scrapbook subscribers. And I used that and I did some stitching on it. I added a number of tags and some paper behind the photo. I used some of the packaging on the top and the bottom, and then I added in a couple of pine branches and some pearls. This layout, Fa La La, was made with some modeling paste, and then I put some embossing powder over the top to make it sparkle and give it some extra dimension. I used some of the 49 and Market frames. I love this deer, and then I love these poinsettias and this rose. I love the color. I think that it added a lot to the layout and went really well with this green color. And then I added a couple of little jewels. This layout, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. I guess that could be the title, or it could be A Joyous Christmas, either one. But I made this using some scraps from other layouts and also branding strips, and I put them on a diagonal, and then I tore a piece of the 49 and Market paper. I used a whole bunch of the papers and the ephemera pieces behind the photos, some tabs, some tags, and then I added a couple of bows, and of course these gorgeous poinsettias. I love adding those to Christmas layouts. This layout, Merry Christmas, was again created using one of the cut files, and then I did some stitching on this one as well. I love stitching on cut files. I love the texture that it adds. I used a scallop punch and a whole bunch of the pattern papers, and I layered them on top of each other. I added these beautiful poinsettias. I have a thing for poinsettias. I really love them. And then a whole bunch of jewels and bling to give these trees that Christmas feel. So for this layout, I also used the modeling paste in the background with some jewels. And then this paper is so beautiful on its own. I love these large flowers in either corner. And then I used a red frame, some tags, and a whole bunch of other ephemera and die cuts from the kit. This layout, Happy Holidays, was created using this paper. It had a circle on it, so I did some stitching on the circle. A lot of the stitching gets covered up, but I still think that enough shows for it to add to the layout. I used, again, a whole bunch of the die cut pieces and then the florals from the kit. I used some die cut pine branches, and then I added some pearls to this as well. And I love this little tiny white poinsettia. These layouts were made using the November 2021 kit. In this kit, we got a number of the papers and embellishments from the beautiful collection by Prima called Christmas Sparkle, and that was designed by Frank Garcia. For this layout, I used a frame around the outside, and I used the strips of papers in the corners. I made a square from the pattern paper, and I turned it to look a little bit like a diamond, and then I added a punched out border. That's from the pattern paper, and then some lace around the outside as well. I used the beautiful flowers. I added a little bit of extra sparkle with diamond dust. I put one in each corner of this inner square, and then I also added some to the outside frame. For this layout, Christmas Eve, I use a number of the tags and the layering pieces, the cut apart pieces, and I made a diagonal with those. And then in either corner, I added a large cluster of the beautiful flowers. I added some die cuts in silver, and then I have a number of little chipboard hearts and this beautiful chipboard angel. For this layout, I scrap lifted myself because I thought that this collection would look really nice with a snow globe theme. So I use a piece of acetate, and then I cut it in a circle. I used a piece of dark blue paper. I covered it with some snowflakes that I made using the stencil. I added an ephemera piece for the tree, a chipboard piece, and I believe a fussy cut piece. I inked all of the edges with some Distress Oxide. For the base, I used a number of different chipboard pieces, and then I added some holly leaves all around the outside. For this layout, a cozy little Christmas, I used again my Creative Scrapbook cut file. I backed it with some of the pattern papers. I used those strips of paper again. I used some lace as a border, and then I added the chipboard pieces and some other embellishments to the background, and I did some mixed media in the background as well. This layout, "'Tis the Season to Sparkle," was again made with one of the cut files. I did some mixed media with the stencil in the background, and then I used some fussy cut pieces to make some corner pieces, and then I wanted to add some sparkle, so I added a few jewels that I had in my stash to give it that real Christmas look. And then I absolutely love this little chipboard piece of this mouse. These layouts were made using the January kit. In the January kit, we received a number of papers and embellishments from a 49 and Market collection and a Simple Stories collection, and they went together so beautifully. For this layout, I used one of the My Creative Scrapbook cut files. I did some stitching on the word moments, and then I used some texture paste and a stencil on the word everyday to give that a little bit of dimension. And then I used the strips of paper on the top and on the bottom. And I love those strips of paper. Maybe I use them too much, but I absolutely love the results of having all the different papers of the collection really close to each other. I just think that it brings out all the beauty of the different papers. So I made 3 large clusters using all of the flowers and the other embellishments, and then I made some white splatters in the background. For this layout, I used some triangles of different sizes and placed them in different directions, and then I popped them up. I mounted my photo on top of them. I love these large butterflies, and then I also added a number of fussy cut pieces and chipboard pieces all around the triangles. Oh, and I also used the stencil in the background with some modeling paste. For this layout, I fussy cut out this large heart and then a whole bunch of butterflies, and then I mounted the butterflies on the heart, and I added some pearls and some glitter paste to them to make the butterflies draw a little bit more attention. I added a small title cluster down here and even a smaller one up here, and then first I did some mixed media in the background. And then for this layout, I used a number of the layering pieces that were in the kit. I layered them up and put them behind my photo. I used some punches to make some borders, and then I again used a whole bunch of the fussy cut pattern paper pieces, and then the chipboard pieces, the ephemera pieces, and then a couple of die cut florals. These layouts were made using the February kit. The February kit featured a 49 and Market collection called Vintage Artistry Naturalist. And when I say that it featured that collection, it just means it has a lot of products from that collection, but of course, there are other products in the kit as well. So for the background of this layout, I used some modeling paste through the stencil. I used a punch. I punched out this bottom scallop, and then these strips were from the kit. And then I also used this very large ephemera piece that was in the kit, and then I backed it with some of the pattern papers. And then because I was including a picture of an abandoned building, on this layout, I wanted to use a whole bunch of different florals and leaves and branches and kind of mimic the look of the abandoned building. I added the beautiful flowers, and then I also added some butterflies, and then I made a little title cluster up here. For this layout, I again used those strips of paper, this time on just the top and on the side, and then I used some modeling paste on the background. The flowers are kind of going around the arc of the circle on the left-hand side. I used these large triangles, again using the strips of paper, and then I made a small cluster up here with some sentiments. For this layout, I used one of the frames that was in the kit. I used a punch that was in my stash, and I made a center strip, and then I have the border strips on either side. I used a whole bunch of the sentiments from the kit, and I layered up a lot of the ephemera pieces, and I included some pattern paper as well. And then I popped up my title on some foam, and I added a couple of branches. This layout was made using some punches. I punched out some hexagons. I punched out some larger ones and then some smaller ones in red to add a little bit of a touch of red to the layout. And I used this photo of a squirrel that we would often see on our back porch. I used the flowers in various places on the layout, and then I also added some butterflies with some pearls. For this layout, I used one of the monthly cut files. I cut it out in black, and then I backed it with some of the papers from the kit, and then I used some modeling paste on those papers, and then I added some pearls from my stash, and I made 4 little embellished corners. Looks like I have to add one of these embellishments back on there. I used a circular photo with one of the titles. These layouts were made using the March kit, and the March kit had this really colorful collection from Prima by Frank Garcia called Peach Tea. For this layout, I used the stamp in the background that we got in the kit. I used a stencil, and I did some mixed media. I cut out some strips of paper. I wove them a little bit, and I created the shape of a triangle. I put my photo in the lower left-hand corner, and then I added a whole bunch of the embellishments that were in the kit. The flowers, the chipboard pieces, some tags, and then I added a couple of peach-colored branches as well. This layout, Family Day, was made with one of the pattern papers. I fussy cut out the center of it, and then I used some really thin strips of paper, and I used a different design this time, and I was glad that I switched it up a little bit, but I like the way that that design looks. And then I again used the beautiful flowers that were in the kit. I added some diamond dust to give them just a little bit more sparkle, and then I added the gold branches that I embossed, and then I added this punched border with some jewels. This layout, Let's Fly Sky High, this was made using one of the pattern papers with some modeling paste in the background. I wanted to have these hot air balloons, so one of them was a chipboard, one of them was fussy cut, and then I created a large cluster with a number of the embellishments, the flowers, ephemera pieces, some chipboard pieces, and then some die cut pieces as well. And then this layout, Loving This Life, this was created again with those strips of paper in either corner, and then one of the cut files from the website. And then I also used a number of the chipboard pieces and the florals to embellish the layout. And I again have this hot air balloon theme because there were so many hot air balloons in the kit, and I like the size of these. I thought these fit well on this layout. These layouts were made using the March kit. In the March kit, we got a number of papers and embellishments from the 49 and Market Art Options Avesta collection. For this layout, I used a whole bunch of layering pieces, and I layered them up behind the photo of my dog Jackson, and there's my daughter Julia. And then I used a cut file from my creative scrapbook, and I did a little bit of stitching on it. I backed it with the pattern papers. I fussy cut out a whole bunch of these really pretty flowers from one of the pattern papers, and then along with the ephemera pieces, I used them to embellish the layout. I also used some of these really pretty dimensional flowers that were in the kit. For this layout, Smile, I started with these large shutters. I knew I wanted to use these, and then I layered up some pieces behind the photo. I used this banner, and I use that to kind of anchor this whole cluster. I have these two circles, but you really can't see them because I covered them up with so many of the embellishments. I use the dimensional flowers, and then I also use a whole bunch of the ephemera pieces and fussy cut pieces on the layout. And then you could see, of course, I use these strips of paper that I love so much, lots of them on the bottom, and then a little bit peeking through on the top. For this layout, This Moment Has My Heart, I again use those strips of paper. Here's more of those fussy cut flowers. I really loved those images on those pattern papers. I did some stitching on the cut file. I backed it with an offset to make it pop off the page a little bit, and then I included a number of butterflies. Love butterflies. For this layout, This Beautiful Life, I did some stitching in the background. I included these chipboard pieces. I have the dimensional flowers, and I added some diamond dust to those. I did some ripping in the background, and I have some of the pattern paper coming through. And then I used a couple of the frames that were in the kit as well. For this layout, Delightful, I used this really cool paper that had butterflies on it, so I fussy cut out a centerpiece and I left the butterflies on it. I did some stitching, I added some pearls, and then for the photo cluster, I used this really cute frame die cut, and then I layered it along with a whole bunch of leaves and sentiments, butterflies, tickets, and I added a title popped up on some foam. And then I created a little cluster up here with some flowers, and I added some die cuts. These layouts were made using the May kit. The May kit had a Simple Stories and a Blue Fern Studios collection. For this layout, Sweet Life, I use a photo of my daughter drinking a very large sweet drink, and then I used one of the beautiful pattern papers. It was already printed with all of these beautiful florals in a wreath, and so I didn't have to do too much. I added some layered circles that I distressed around the photo, and then I added a number of butterflies and some florals to the wreath. I mounted this on another piece of pattern paper, and then I used some photo corners to fill in these corners. This layout, it's kind of simple, but I thought the pattern paper was so beautiful, it just kind of did all the work for me. I used some hexagons to cut out not just some hexagon shapes from the pattern paper, but also to cut out my photos. I used these butterflies that were fussy cut from some of the papers, and then I used the dimensional flowers as well. For this layout, Love Grows Here, I used one of the cut files, and then I stitched on it. I layered up some distressed hearts for the letter O, and I included 3 photos, one of each of my dogs, and I put some pattern paper in a different color behind each one. I filled in the areas around the cut file with some of the dimensional flowers and the other embellishments from the kit. And then this layout, Good Times, I made this using 2 hearts. I put some fussy cut flowers inside the hearts, and then I added a whole bunch of the flowers that were in the kit, a little bit of lace from my stash, and some butterflies as well. I just love this piece of paper. These layouts were created using the June kit. In this kit, we got a Prima Frank Garcia collection. We also got some Bo Bunny papers as well. For this layout, I used the My Creative Scrapbook cut file. I used a little mini roller, and I made some areas of color on the background. And then I put the cut file on top of it. I had added some stitching to it. I used the stamp from the kit, or one of the many stamps that was in that set, and I stamped some flowers in coordinating colors, and then I also stamped some of the hot air balloons, and I layered those on top as well. This layout, My Sunshine, this was made using one of the Prima papers in the collection. I fussy cut out a whole bunch of tags from another pattern paper, and then I used the dimensional flowers and some die cut leaves, and then a number of the chipboard pieces and the ephemera pieces from the kit. So for this layout, I tried something new. I used one of the cut files as a template to stitch. I stitched the wreath using a lot of different colors of embroidery thread, and then I used some of the small tags, this tiny frame, and a number of butterflies to embellish the rest of the layout. This layout, Love This Crazy Life, was made again with one of the cut files. I did some stitching on it. I used some strips of pattern paper in the background, and I used some punched out borders between each of the strips. I used dimensional flowers. I added a little bit of diamond dust to them to make them a little bit more sparkly. And then I used a number of the ephemera pieces and some fussy cut pieces, some chipboard pieces to each of the clusters. And then this layout, Prom Night, this was made using this really pretty background paper that did a lot of the work for me. I cut out the area that was inside this frame, and I added a different pattern paper to the background, and then I created some clusters with these beautiful flowers and with some die cut leaves, and then I also created a little mini cluster underneath the title, which is Prom Night, which my daughter keeps reminding me is the name of a horror movie, but I thought that it went well with this layout, so I decided to use it anyway. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this layout share. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Other than that one layout, there are process videos for all of these layouts on my channel if you would like to know how anything was created. I will be back again with part 2 of this layout chair. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.